Some mysteries are so cold they can freeze logic itself. Imagine Alexandra Land Island, a grim scrap of land lost in the Franz Joseph Land archipelago, 1,000 kilometers to the North Pole. Ice, basalt, and absolute silence. No roads, no buildings, just an endless white desert swept by an icy wind. And then Russian researchers from the Russian Arctic National Park are scouring this lifeless plateau. Suddenly, their attention is caught by a barely noticeable anomaly. Jutting out of the ice like a dinosaur bone is a rusty metal box, a ventilation shaft, dozens of kilometers from the nearest hint of civilization. Why would anyone need to build a permanent bunker here? The answer to that question turned out to be so chilling it made even seasoned historians shudder. Today, step by step, we will thaw out the story of Base Queen. To understand what happened here, we need to go back to the height of World War II. It was 1942. The failure of the German blitzkrieg on the Eastern Front was becoming ever more apparent. But there was another theater of war, invisible to the eye yet desperately important: the battle for the weather. It's hard to believe today, but back then, meteorological reports were among the most important state secrets. Without an accurate forecast, it was impossible to plan airstrikes, submarine movements, or naval convoy escorts. And all of this information was born right here, in the Arctic. The cyclones that later swept over Europe formed precisely here. Control over the weather meant control over the skies and the seas. The Allies had a colossal advantage. British and American stations in Greenland and Svalbard supplied their headquarters with precise data. The German submarines, meanwhile, were operating almost blindly. So Berlin made a decision: to create secret strongholds in the very depths of the Arctic, where no one would think to look for them. That is how Alexandra Land Island appeared on the maps, a seemingly utterly useless piece of land. But was it really an accident or someone's cold calculation? The operation received a name that still draws a nervous smirk from historians: Schatzgräber, treasure hunter. For a weather station, you must admit, a strange name. Barometer, understandable. Cyclone, predictable. But treasure hunter. It wasn't raw recruits who were dropped onto the island, but a special group. 10 men, physically tough, with ideal knowledge of radio operations, geology, and demolition. They had everything with them: a powerful radio station, cipher machines, several years' worth of food, light artillery in case of a sudden attack. And something else: a compact drilling rig and a safe with geological maps, on which certain coordinates were circled in red. A simple weather station doesn't require drilling through tens of meters of ice. What were they searching for in the permafrost? Treasure? A passage? Something not belonging to our time? In record time, a cylindrical bunker rose on the glacier. It resembled a giant tin can, capable of withstanding winds of 200 kilometers per hour. Inside, cable heaters, sealed compartments, supplies packed in zinc boxes. The outside world vanished. The polar night, lasting half a year, began. These men were trained like polar wolves, but training couldn't prepare them for the main enemy: the silence. Soon the garrison began to see shadows on the edge of their circle of light, to hear footsteps where no human had ever trod. Someone whispered about voices coming straight from the depths of the ice. The commander explained it away as magnetic storms and the northern lights pressing on their minds. But during those same days, the radio station began transmitting very strange messages. In the fragments of encryptions intercepted later, it read, "Ground structure does not match. Continuing drilling in Sector 7. And then a request. Additional charges needed for deep sounding." What anomaly did their instruments detect beneath the multi-meter thick ice? What was hidden in Sector 7? And now, a moment that will make your skin crawl. Because the most secret base in the Arctic was destroyed not by a bullet, not by an assault, but by the most ordinary of meals. May 1944. Canned food supplies are running low. Luck smiles upon the soldiers. A huge polar bear appears near the bunker. One precise shot, and the garrison has a mountain of fresh meat. The cook prepares steaks with blood. The starved men eat with appetite. About a week and a half passes. First, the radio operator fell ill, fever of 104, wild muscle pain. By morning, several more couldn't get out of bed. Their faces swelled. Every movement caused sharp pain in their eyes. The diagnosis was made immediately: trichinosis. The bear meat was riddled with parasite larvae that were now devouring the men from the inside out. No cure existed in these icy conditions. And that's when the commander makes a decision that violates all the laws of military secrecy. He goes on the air in plain text and sends out an SOS. He reveals the secret location of the base to the enemy. Because among all the possible deaths, death by parasites turned out to be the most terrifying. The response from Berlin came immediately. But the method of rescue revealed just how important this base was. For a handful of dying polar explorers, they sent not just any plane, but a strategic FW-200 Condor, a 4-engine monster designed for long-range naval reconnaissance. The huge machine landed on skis right on the unprepared ice of the island. To land and then lift such a colossus at the pole of cold was a technical miracle. But they did it. The 8 survivors, on the brink of life and death, were loaded on board. Before departure, the officers staged a cleanup day in the bunker. They melted cipher machine circuits, burned documents, but they abandoned everything in monstrous haste, almost in panic. Greatcoats remained hanging on hooks, mess tins with uneaten stew on the tables. One of the officers, glancing back in farewell, legend has it, muttered, "Let it all go to hell. The Queen is dead." But decades later, researchers would establish one thing they did not destroy. In a frozen box, a map and a metal cylinder remained. Why? Lack of time? Or were they simply afraid to touch these items one extra time? Decades passed. The ice slowly retreated and finally exposed what it had hidden since 1944. In 2016, Russian scientists landed on the island and entered the bunker. What they saw was akin to opening a time capsule. Everything was frozen in that very moment of panicked flight. Perfectly preserved leather boots. It seemed you could still wear them. Newspapers of the Das Deutsche Wochenschau from 1943. Ampoules of medicine that hadn't lost their seal. Chemical protection suits, batteries, tools. It seemed as if people had stepped out for a minute and were about to return. But the most important thing waited in the corner of the bunker, partitioned off by a waterproof wooden shield. There lay a working map with handwritten corrections, and a metal cylinder covered in petrified grease. When it was opened, inside were microfilms, stamped top secret. Addressee, Kriegsmarine High Command, Admiral Dönitz's personal cipher. They don't package weather reports that way. What was on these films? The information partially recovered from the microfilms baffled geologists. The Germans had indeed been drilling. They had samples of deep rock. But in that area of the island, according to all scientific data, there is absolutely nothing of value. No oil, no uranium, no rare earth metals. Barren rock. Then why drill? Why bring an expensive rig and risk men's lives? The reports contained notes about an anomalous signal reflection and structural cavities at a depth of over 40 meters. What were they expecting to find there? The name of the operation, Treasure Hunter, took on a truly ominous ring. These people were not engaged in meteorology. They were excavating. But what? On this score, there are 3 theories, each more insane than the last. Theory 1, the secret Arctic depot. According to one version, the island was being prepared as a hidden base for German submarines, the wolf packs that were supposed to break through the Arctic basin. The bunker was a transit warehouse for fuel, weapons, and encryption equipment. Pragmatic, logical, but it doesn't explain the drilling rig. Theory 2, wonder weapon proving ground. Some experts believe that unknown aircraft were tested here, disc-shaped or vertical takeoff. They required a level horizon and an absence of radar. Among the items found was strange optics that don't match any standard Wehrmacht equipment of that era. Documents about unidentified targets in the sky after the war became the basis for myths about Reich flying saucers. Coincidence. And the most disturbing, Theory 3, the hunt for Hyperborea. Within the depths of the Third Reich, there were occult structures that believed in an ancient Aryan ancestral home far in the north. They were searching for an entrance to the inner cavities of the Earth, hidden under the polar cap. Hence the sectoral drilling. Rumor has it that in one of the commander's unpublished diaries, there was a line, "We found a warm cavity, but it is not what it seems." What did they open up, and why did they fall silent forever? Now Alexandra Land Island is once again immersed in silence. Some of the finds still lie in special archives under the stamp "Not subject to publication." Why? They are in no hurry to answer that question. Base Queen showed that even in the most lifeless point on the planet, you can hide a secret of such power that it will outlive empires. What were these people searching for? Treasure, a military advantage, or something not meant for human eyes? The Arctic is in no hurry to give up its answers. But I will ask you one question. What could have frightened an elite unit more than a painful death from disease? What did they leave there in the ice knowing they would never return? Your version might be the closest to the truth. Write it in the comments. I really want to know what you think. Thank you for being with me in this frozen investigation.